Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 13th of July 2023. Let's go straight to the northeast sector of the front line, which is here, Kupiansk up there to, Kupiansk to Svatva to Kreminna. Quite a bit of activity has been taking place in this sector over the last few days. On my map, that looks like this: Kupiansk, Svatva, Kreminna. My blue line represents Andrew Perpetua, pro-Ukrainian mapper. That's the defensive lines for the Russians, according to him. And the red line represents Syriac maps, the defensive line for the Russians for that pro-Russian mapper. And you can see they broadly agree now, apart from in this area by Kupiansk. Haven't heard anything about the advance there for some time. There's talk about activity around Kotlyarivka here, which is to the northwest of Svatva, sorry, and then Kuzyemivka activity there. In fact, there's some reports saying that there was maybe 35 engagements around this whole area. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it's probably fairly active. The ISW American military think tank says geolocated footage shows that Russian forces have advanced further east of Kotlyarivka as of July the 11th. Now, this is actually referring to footage I referenced yesterday to show that there were 3 tanks, or actually there might have been self-propelled howitzers here on the edge of that railway line. As I said, that was evidence yesterday, a good couple of days ago, probably the footage. And I'm not even sure that footage shows that these 3 vehicles, some saying self-propelled howitzers, 2 S-19 Mr. S. I'm not sure they were taken out in that artillery hit there. I think that artillery was taking out stuff around there, behind there. They had already previously been destroyed, but that is what we had already known, and the ISW is just confirming that now. So that is how Andrew Perpetua had confirmation for the lines moving forward, but that was in line with what Syriac maps had anyway. So you can see they're broadly in agreement. Most places around here, there's a lot of activity taking place in Novoselivska. I don't know that the ISW makes an awful lot of claim other than the Russian MOD saying that they repelled Ukrainian ground attacks in Novoselivska. Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations there as well. So both making claims to that effect. And then we're going to go down to, we're going to come down south here towards Kreminna and to this Torska area where there was a lot of talk yesterday about what's going on here. So the claims were that the Ukrainians were shelling the Russians in Torska. And then that video was taken off the unit's Facebook page, Telegram channel page, I think, and people were wondering exactly what's going on. You had mappers showing progress for the Russians to reflect that in this whole area. And then yesterday, well, if we see what the ISW say, geolocated footage published on July the 12th indicates that Russian forces do not hold positions in Torska, and despite Russian mill blogger claims to the contrary. Russian mill bloggers largely claim that Russian forces broke through Ukrainian positions in Torska and advanced up to the eastern outskirts of the settlement. Russian mill bloggers also claim that elements of the 21st Motorized Rifle Brigade captured a height east of Nevska, which is fairly near to there, near the Zravka Gully, and that Ukrainian forces launched counterattacks to attempt to retake the position. So, okay, let's go to that first point. This is the geolocated footage that ISW are talking about. Just a TikTok video showing, and there's a guy on this video just
Ніяких орків нема, боїв теж ніяких немає. Не вірте фейкам новинам. Підривів не було і не буде. Це все Україна.
So calmly talking about the situation there in a village next to, in Zarichna, next to Torska, saying it's really calm. In fact, I'm just going to find a geolocation. He says everything is good, quiet. It's the 12th of July. Village is Zarichna. Everything is quiet and fine. No Russians, no battles. Don't believe fake news. There was no Russian breakthrough, and there won't be. This is all Ukraine. So that's what he says, and that's geolocated to this position. But that's quite a long way back, you see. So I don't know, although, it's still all part of this settlement. I guess, he's just looking in this general area. So I'm not sure that does massively um, refute the claims. So some people are saying, like the ISW, saying that they're not in Torsk as a result of that kind of footage, and others, as someone says, that is almost 3 kilometers from the reported forward Russian forces. I don't think this video shows much of anything confirming or disproving Russian advances. So I'm personally still unsure of what's going on there. I reserve any definite judgment. It could be that the Russians have advanced and are. We know that the Russians are strong in this area, so there have been some claims to suggest that, even from Cherevati, the Ukrainian spokesperson. The enemy has accumulated a powerful group in the Liman and Kupiansk directions. So this is certainly something to worry about. Now, Syriac Maps has said regarding recent news about the Torsk salient, it's necessary to clarify Russians are present in the suburbs, not the town itself, which is under the full control of the Ukrainian army. During the many weeks combats have taken place just 1 kilometer from the first buildings of the town. The recent advance was only another step of the positional battle ongoing since last year in Luhansk and not the beginning of a Liman offensive. As it was said previously, Russian army is in defensive mode and will continue in this way as Ukrainian offensive capabilities don't diminish in the next weeks. Okay, so quite a bit of confusing, quite a number of confusing statements going on here. I think there is activity. I think there probably are on the outskirts of Torska, but this, as the argument here, is that that's not unusual considering where they've been for a long time anyway. So if you see the kind of advance, that is a good 5 kilometers. There's a good couple of kilometers difference between the two mappers, possibly, but yeah, they may be there, they may not. Syriac Maps has walked back a little bit of some of the rhetoric going on there, and walked back the map a tiny bit as of what they made a claim of yesterday. So yeah, just a touche, but they're not in the town, which is quite a large kind of spread out environment there. You make up your own minds as to what you think is going on there. Now, this looks a little bit like that for Poulet Volant, the mapper that largely is based on Andrew Perpetua, showing. I mean, that's showing a rejigging of the map rather than the Ukrainians retaking area. So that is what's going on in that neck of the woods. Nevska, by the way, just to let you know, if we come out, is further to the north over here. So a height. The Zaravka Gully is this area between Ploshchanka and Chervono-Popivka. I think it might be this gully around there. So it could be something around here that the Russians have taken. That's the claim. And then we come further down to the south past Bilahorivka, past Sperna. Haven't heard anything from Sperna over the last 24 hours. And we come into Bakhmut. So if we get rid of that, we can go to look and see what's going on in Bakhmut. Just to let you know what Rebar said, the pro-Russian source, they say the Kreminna sector, fierce fighting continues near Torska. Despite the deployment of additional enemy forces, Russian troops have reached the eastern outskirts of the village. Then it goes on to near Bakhmut. Russian troops launched a successful counterattack near Klishivka after bringing reserves into the battle. By the end of the day, the zone of control at the heights west of the village had been significantly expanded. So that is quite significant. They are claiming, Rebar claiming that actually the Russians have pushed the Ukrainians back in the Klishivka area. The ISW says geolocated footage shows that Russian forces have advanced. What am I talking about? Let's go on to the right one. So the Ukrainian Kovalev reported that Ukrainian forces achieved partial success in the Bilahorivka and Drivka area and Bilahorivka-Kurdimivka directions. So this is to go a little bit further to the south from Klishivka. That is in this direction. Some partial success there, but it's kind of generic, not too granular. Another Mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces attacked the southwestern outskirts of Bakhmut. We'll talk about that in a second. Kremlin-affiliated Mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces broke through the Russian defenses close to Bakhmut, but that Russian artillery units forced Ukrainians to retreat. But not a lot of mention. Oh no, here we go. Several Russian Mill bloggers claimed that Russian forces counterattacked Ukrainian positions on the northern outskirts of Klishchiivka and pushed Ukrainian units from the outskirts of the settlement and Klishchiivka's surrounding dominant heights. So there are these claims that to the south, the Russians have pushed the Ukrainians back. There was claims about fighting in the village, particularly at the northern entrance coming in here on this road. That meanders its way into the north and down. Remember, this is all on higher ground to the west and northwest. So if we look at some of the other claims sources, Defense Ministry says that Ukraine advances south of Bakhmut. The Ukrainian military has advanced on Bakhmut's southern flank and solidified newly taken positions, says Hanamania. That goes against what we've just heard. Forces advance at the flanks of the trench bulwark northwest of Klishchiivka, says this source. But again, that doesn't jive with what the Russians are saying. And who is correct, I don't know wholly. And as I reported this morning, Cheravati said that around Klishchiivka, carrier invites were seen, but the battles with them clearly showed, he says, that their business is police duties because as soldiers they have no value. Having suffered losses, they retreated. I think that if they try to go into battle with the Ukrainian brigades again, they'll be completely defeated. And that's referring to the footage whereby you see them getting hit quite heavily by artillery. And this is a T-90 getting hit by Kurdyivka. It then sort of drives to here, stops, and then I presume gets hit by something else because it soon ends up turretless and taken out. So that's a T-90 taken out near Kurdyivka. But as far as Klishchiivka is concerned, I'm not sure. I assume there'll be backwards and forwards sort of fighting going on there. And there are still a lot of Russian forces in the area. They have reinforced these areas quite considerably. So every bit of land that the Ukrainians take will be hard fought for. And indeed, in Bakhmut, we have some Russian gains, as according to Andrew Perpetua. And this is not unusual for this area. We've seen the Ukrainians now in Bakhmut several times and supposedly pushed out from there. As I said, the ISW suggests that the Ukrainians had offences repelled there, but actually, it's not necessarily what we see from the mapping. That all the three mappers suggest that that's where the Ukrainians now are, and we've had Deep State map, which is a yellow line here showing the Russian defences, also pull back their line here over the last 3 or 4 days. So I think this is really dynamic. It could well be that the Ukrainians are back in Bakhmut this morning, today. It could be that they weren't repelled from there. I mean, it's just the fog of war. There's lots going on. There is talk about how the Ukrainians are getting close to the E40 highway coming in here to the north of Bakhmut, and that they are approaching the highway from this Orikovo-Vasilivka direction. I think there's mention of that in an ISW bit here. So Ukrainian forces continue counteroffensive operations north and south of Bakhmut. A Russian Mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces gained a foothold on a height east of Orikovo-Vasilivka and have almost reached the E40 highway. So that is in this area there, the yellow area there. You can see the yellow areas which are claimed or contested areas there and there, as this is where they're getting close to the highway. Now, if we go and look on my map, I'm going to do something I haven't done before with you. I only do it accidentally, which is go into 3D mode, and we're going to go into this gully here. Now, this gully is, you can see as we move around here a little bit, I can't, on the browser version of this, I can't accentuate the heights. So what you can do on the standalone version of this, Google Earth Pro, but it means I can't use it on a browser, and it's much more difficult to flip between showing that and showing you stuff on the browser. So I just can't do that. But you can accentuate the heights so you can see it more easily, because you can't really see the heights that easily from this. But apparently it's quite steep, this gully here, and on both sides, and actually that makes it quite difficult to negotiate easily. If we sort of come back from there, you can see, I don't know if I can Yeah, no, I can't very easily. We now go back to looking at the 3D. I'll zoom out. This gully here is what we're sort of looking down, and that's where they're trying to get across. The Ukrainians are trying to get across there to get closer to the road here, but that will be difficult maneuver. That will be a difficult maneuver for them, but they're obviously making some gains there, if we can believe the ISW in that case. I haven't heard anything about the North Rozdalivka, Vesele, Yakovlivka area there, or anything about activity within Bakhmut as well. So it has been quite a quiet day just in general for information on the front lines, right up and down the front lines. Indeed, we hear nothing really about Avdiivka. If we come down and look at the ISW, just says that there are all the normal places: Pervomaisky, Avdiivka, Novelska, Marinka, Novomykhailivka, Pobieda. Those are all to the south. Here, it does go on to say Russian Southern Group of Forces spokesperson claimed that the Russian Southern Forces destroyed Ukrainian infantry units attempting to break through Russian defenses in the direction of Vodyane. So this is the Russians claiming, as we come down south from Bakhmut, we come to Avdiivka. These are claims that the Ukrainians are attacking towards Vodyane and that the Russians disrupted that offensive. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces attacked towards Lastok, which is odd because this is saying that the Ukrainians are attacking towards Vodyane, but the Russians are attacking towards this little village here. Now, you're only going to really get there from the south, because if you're attempting to attack there from the northeast, you've got to go through Avdiivka to get there, through the industrial area of Avdiivka. So that's never going to happen. And yet they say that they're attacking towards there, but haven't got into the village. So I don't really understand. I mean, you've got Severny before that, and you've got quite a lot of open ground that the Russians have for a long time struggled to get through. So I can't make much sense of those claims. Another mill blogger claimed that Russian forces launched unsuccessful operations near Severny, and that could well be the same sort of activity. But yeah, make of that what you will. There's been a lot of footage of equipment being destroyed, particularly Russian equipment in the Avdiivka area over the last 3 or 4 days. So I have sort of hinted at that, sort of shown you bits and pieces of that. But yeah, just to let you know that it's there. The Rebar, pro-Russian source, says in the Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians unsuccessfully tried to attack in direction Vodyane, and thus the enemy is trying to secure transportation routes to Avdiivka, which have fallen under Russian artillery fire. I'm not sure that's particularly relevant for Vodyane. Their transport routes are here up to the north, just to the north of Lastok, and at one stage, you've got railway and roads coming in from the north as well. But that attack near Krasnohorivka, sort of, there's fire control over this area. It might well be that there's fire control over this main supply route. I mean, at the end of the day, it is well within artillery range. So that's 14 kilometers. So the whole of Avdiivka is under fire control effectively, as in it can be hit by longer range artillery. And I remember Andrew Perpetua saying on one of his lives quite a long time ago, or a couple of months ago, that loads of places are routinely hit behind Avdiivka. It's not like it's just concentrating on Avdiivka. All of these areas are getting hit quite routinely with artillery and all sorts of stuff. It'd be interesting to see what the distance there is. That would be 50 kilometers, so all the way back there. So more realistically, that's going to be let's have a look. Yeah, anywhere probably in this range. So and of course you can move that whole line further forward. So if you've got artillery there, then you can hit, pretty much any of these places around here. So and he was saying that don't just think it's happening in Avdiivka. The places around Avdiivka get hit quite a lot. Right, as we come out of Avdiivka, there's activity in Marinka, in Novomykhailivka as well. And then we hear a couple of things mentioned about Vuhledar down to the south here and Solodka up here. So the ISW says that the Russian MOD claimed Russian forces repelled a Ukrainian assault in the direction of Petrivska, which is southwest of Vuhledar, and that the Russian MOD claimed that Russian forces stopped Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups in Solodka. So that is there. I think Petrivka is what they're talking about here, in that direction. But as they always say, in the direction of doesn't mean it's anywhere near to the place they're talking about. And in fact, you better off saying in the direction of Yehorivka, I would have thought. But what do I know? Right. So as we come to the west from there, we know that there's lots of activity taking place, but no mapping changes around Staromylska or Izhina and Pryutna. Indeed, there's nothing really to mention. So I'll move on fairly quickly from here. I will give you what Rebar said. In the Velika Novosilka sector, the enemy is constantly trying to attack, taking advantage of the superiority in manpower. Interesting. Despite this, Russian units are successfully holding the Pryutne-Staromylsky defense. That is probably somewhat true, but there will be advances. It's just, you know, it's a fog of war. Don't expect there to be lots of information every day about certain places. So I'm going to, although there's talk about that, it's all the sort of claims of repelled attacks from either side in this general area. But you can see, yeah, no mapping changes there. And we come to the west, past Droznyanka and to Robotna. Now, this is where there is some stuff to say. So if we talk about that, did I have? Yeah, that's how. Sorry, just going back to Velika Novosilka. That's how Poulet Vallon has the map, but that is showing the advances I showed yesterday. I don't think in the last 24 hours there are any advances to report. And then we're going to come down to Robotna in this area here. So you can see that Ukrainians are putting quite a lot of effort into pressuring the Russians here in Robotna, and also at Novopokrovka, where they've lost quite a bit of uh, mechanized equipment in both these places, actually, as I reported yesterday. Now, Rebar, pro-Russian source, again says, in this direction, Russian troops continue to counterattack near Robotna. In recent days, almost all positions previously occupied by the Ukrainians in the sector of the front have been retaken. That's a really bold claim, and I don't know if that holds up. Now, I was talking about how the Ukrainians must have taken the trenches, the main trenches here, either in the east or in the east and west of Robotna, due to the claims coming out. We had Russian source last night saying that there were big tank battles in the area of Robotna. Then we have no, actually, that can wait till later. Then we have claims here. So the Russian forces targeted Ukrainian tank to the west of Novopokrovka. So that's just to remind you that there is lots of equipment being damaged. Now, also, lots of equipment I've seen, Ukrainian equipment being damaged by first person view drones. So, this is where the Ukrainians have been really successful over the last couple of months. It seems like the Russians recognize this and are trying to catch up, and they are using FPV drones quite successfully in that area. So, that is to the, just to let you know on the map, this is just by Novopokrovka. So Leopard 2 targeted by a first person drone, first person view drone, Leopard 2A6 up there, 2A4. So you can see that. And then Ukrainian targeting Russian trenches around there. So you can see that, Russian targeted Ukrainian tank with a first person drone. So they really are close to Novopokrovka. Let's go and look at that on my map, actually. So that is to say, right on this front line, we have got we've got Ukrainian equipment being targeted, and then the Russian trenches being targeted there too. So just to take you back to that map, sorry, the first one, yeah, really quite close to the Russians there. So that is just here. So that tank, Ukrainian tank there, being targeted by FPV drones. But as you can see, that's 3 bits of equipment there being targeted. I don't know whether they were taken out by FPV drones. And then we've got all this activity around Robotna as well. So I'm going to show you this. So this is a what do we have? Yes. this is well worth looking at. So not so much about what happens in this. So the Russian forces targeting a Ukrainian trench and Ukrainian US supplied Bradley IFV on the Zaporizhian front line. Right. What I want to show you are the trenches. Right. So look at these. These are quite extensive trench networks, and I think this is the main trench line in the Robotna area. So we have, as I say, as you can see there, really extensive trenches being built, right? So these are Ukrainians now in those trenches. So the Ukrainians won't have built those trenches. These are Russian trenches that the Ukrainians are now in that is being targeted by a Russian FPV drone, first person view drone. And this is then geolocated to Robotna, to just north of Robotna. So there's uh, the Russian targeted Ukrainian trench is there next to the Bradley. And if you see this part of the road in the north of Robotna, and you can see it's just kind of diagonally north, but not far north of there. When you look on my map, so Robotna, so there's that bit of road, and it's basically just around here, right? Show you that again. You've got this kind of difference in landscape, difference in physical geography there. We'll go back to there. That is happening just up here, right? So this appears to be where the trenches are, kind of on this road. You see, there's a road there. And why I'm saying all this to you is because then when we go to Brady Afric's map here, where we can see all of these trench lines that have been built, the first major trench line is to the northeast of Robotna, and indeed is just above where that shape of the road is, along that road there. So that is your main first trench line. The Ukrainians are in that. I would say 100% this footage shows that is the main Russian trench line, and the Ukrainians therefore did successfully take that over the last few days. So everything that I was saying over the last few days and different sources have been saying, I think it is true, and that footage shows that. I belabored that point just because I think it is important, because I think that Russian footage shows that the Ukrainians have taken that first line of defences. But of course, as you can see here with Brady Efrick's brilliant map, that there are, and it's not that the trenches are just like dots here. Actually, this will be broadly connected, but every time he gets visual evidence, it becomes a dot, and the more you get, the closer they get. But there will be continuous trench lines. I would have thought all the way along there. But you can see once you've got past there, you then got a second, a third, a fourth, and then you don't know how many they're still building as we speak. This is a difficult area to attack, but this seems to be one of their main areas, coming through almost where it's the most difficult. I don't know if that's wise. I mean, if you look here, you think there's much more open land there to be able to get through, and just one. If you can just get through here or negotiate the trenches there, you've only got one more, but they're coming through to the east of Robotna, and they've got 4 lines of trenches to overcome. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they know more what they're doing than I do. As we come to the west from Robotna, so there is success around there, but the Russians are defending quite well, it seems. And then the same can be said around Zerebianki, where the Ukrainians are struggling to make large advances. They are consolidating, taking these trench lines. There are trench lines in that area. As no report says, near Zerebianki, fighting continues and Ukrainian troops seem to have taken most of the Russian fortifications to the north. Footage shows that Ukrainian troops have to retreat due to Russian mortar artillery fire, but there is no close combat. So there's a lot of, when there are gains made by the Ukrainians, it's often gains in the grey zone, and you won't see any changes to my Russian defensive lines. It doesn't mean there aren't gains. And if you go and look at people like Andrew Perpetua's map, he'll have certain areas in blue that indicate that the Ukrainians have made gains and they've consolidated, but it doesn't affect the Russian defensive lines. It's just in that big area of grey zone. So a lot of activity taking place, but not a lot of map changes. And we come on down to, no, we don't. We get me to accidentally double press. Double click. Right, we come on to Kherson and the Antonivsky Bridge. A few claims about that area. In the Kherson direction, Russian forces have abandoned their efforts to recapture lost positions near the Antonivsky Bridge, and the current situation primarily involves intermittent artillery exchanges, no imminent threat, which is interesting. And it appears that they are using incendiary munitions in the area to try and flush the Ukrainians out. So there's a number of bits of footage, as well as regular artillery consistently bombarding that area. The ISW says about I pretty much said all I've got to say from these areas. Yeah. So, although here it's a Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces also conducted several unsuccessful attacks near Zerebianki, and that Zaporizhia Oblast head described Ukrainian assaults in the area as large-scale offensive. Although the Zaporizhia Oblast occupation deputy Rogov stated a few hours earlier that reports of Ukrainian offensive in the area are false. So there are conflicting Russian reports that actually the Ukrainians are putting on a big offensive in that Zerebianki area near Pyatikhatki, but at the same time they then say the opposite. So hey, there you go. But anyway, that wasn't what I was getting on to talk about. It was about Kherson. So Russian mill bloggers claimed that Ukrainian forces continue to maintain positions to the east or on the left bank of the Kherson or Dnipro River near the Antonivsky Bridge. Prominent mill blogger claimed that the Ukrainian grouping on the left bank is not conducting offensive operations and that Russian forces are located a few hundred meters to the south. Another mill blogger claimed that Russian forces have stopped assaults near the Antonivsky Bridge because of Ukrainian artillery superiority in the area. Interesting. So it looks like the Ukrainians are still putting quite a lot of effort into their artillery, into hemming the Russians in, so that they can't try and recapture certain areas. As I said, it's going to be interesting to see what the Ukrainians do here because there's really only one road into Oleshki. Although they are trying to advance along the Konka River here, they do have control, apparently, of this area of the Konka River. Yeah, and the last thing that the ISW says that I thought was worth pointing out is that Russian sources claim that Ukrainian forces also struck the outskirts of Tokmak with cluster munitions. Just to remind you where Tokmak is, that is one of the objectives one would think for the attack down through Zaporizhia. So you have Tokmak just below where we're looking, so Robotna, Tokmak, and then comes on to Melitopol there. So that apparently was attacked with cluster munitions. Now, cluster munitions, I mean, if we look at how far away Tokmak is, that is actually within the longer range of some of the Ukrainian artillery pieces. So that's like 30 kilometers. So they are using pieces that have a 40-kilometer range. So that is perfectly plausible. But have they been delivered cluster munitions yet? Well, we know they've been given some by the Turkish. So Russian uh, sources claim that Ukrainian forces conducted the strikes with Western-provided cluster munitions and argue that Ukrainian forces waited until the announcement of the transfer of the munitions to use them. Ukrainian forces have their own stocks of non-Western cluster munitions, and the ISW has not seen visual confirmation that Ukrainian forces struck Tokmak. So they do have those. It's plausible, but there's no visual confirmation that that has actually happened yet. I don't know whether using cluster munitions, well, it depends what their targets are at Tokmak. It's not going to be just littering the town, one would assume. Anyway, that's the Frontline update for today. I hope that was in some way useful. Please like, subscribe, and share. And thank you for all of your support. Really, really appreciate it. Take care. Toodle pips. I will see you later. Well, no, I won't see you. You'll see me if you're watching the video. Or you'll hear me if you're just listening. Shut up, piss.